That shot you remember, because that's the table where Camille was trained for blind tastings. A year and a half ago, while I was shooting a YouTube video, I was actually on the set of Drops of God. I captured a lot of footage and was told not to release it until the series came out. I had a lot of that footage locked away in a hard drive and I completely forgot about it until my good friend Creative Fabian says, "Hey, you need to make a video about that experience." And I thought to myself, yeah, duh. Those of you that don't know what it is, Drops of God was originally a Japanese manga that was released between 2004 and 2014. It was a humongous sensation in Japan, even drove up some prices of wines that were featured. And just recently, Apple Plus released an 8-part series based on the manga. From what I understand, it's not 100% faithful to the source material, but I haven't read the manga. I'm not going to do any spoilers because the story is incredibly intricate. I'll just share a few things. The premise is that a very famous wine critic dies. He leaves an inheritance, a cellar worth close to 140 million euros. In order to win that inheritance, he leaves a set of tests for his protege in Japan and his daughter, who he hadn't spoken to in 10 years. It's not often that us wine geeks can see something that's beautifully shot, super well produced, that has to do with hardcore wine stuff. But like fine wine, the show is incredibly complex and I think it has something for everyone. In order to do this video, I sat down over an afternoon and binge watched all 8 episodes, and I watched it with my family, my mother, my father, and my sister. My mother was so engrossed she watched the whole thing, actually. When it comes to wine knowledge, all of them are pretty much at 0. A few years ago, I was in Château Pop shooting a vlog. I'll pin it in the top comment below. And my last visit was Château de Beaucastel, owned by the Perrin family. Famous chateau was actually my second visit there. This property was featured heavily in the film, all of episode 2, also in episode 10 when they go back and do the final test. Okay, let's react to some of the footage I have. So there's filming going on. We have no idea where we're going. I feel like we're in an episode of Yes Theory, trying to sneak in somewhere. So my wine friend is actually the president of the Vignerons Association of Château Pop, so he hooked me up with a scheduling visit, even though Beaucastel told him that they were having a shoot that day. I had no idea what the shoot was about. We're going through this property. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of stuff going on. I did feel like I was in an episode of Yes Theory. It's a YouTube channel I really love. I remember walking in right here, and I had my camera kind of rolling on the side, and everybody was saying, no, don't shoot, don't shoot. And I wanted to take a couple shots. You actually have this low angle right here where we're walking in. Somebody yelled at me right after I took that. That's the main courtyard. That's from a scene in Drops of God where they have a big harvest party. I have the awkward camera angle. They turn it off really quickly because somebody told me, no, turn the camera off. Is that Lorenzo? The guy in the middle right there? Lorenzo's one of the main characters. I wonder if that's him right there. I remember this is Christy. She actually hosted me both times I visited Château de Beaucastel, and I remember her telling me how hectic it was.
Oh, it's been chaotic. It's going to be chaotic.
Look, this is here.
There's about 80 people here filming, technicians, actors, because we're also starting renovation work.
If I remember, it was towards the end of harvest season, or it was harvest season. Château de Beaucastel has some pretty famous fermenting rooms, also some barrel aging rooms that look like they're in this Portuguese quinta, this wood area. They featured prominently in the show. You'll see those right here. I remember Tomas, he's the vigneron's son in the show, said it was his mother's favorite place. I think this is during the part where Camille and Philippe, the owner, get into a little fight and they finally understand each other.
They were here since the beginning of August because they were doing all the decors, you know, and they'll be finished. The last day of filming is the 15th of September.
It's a pretty tight window for how much footage that was shot there. I think we were there in late August, if I remember. So I remember that, yeah, right there. That's the name of the estate in Drops of God.
Sangre, this is part of the film because they changed the name of the family from Perrin to Chassangre. So this is a absolute fake.
And I have no idea why they changed the name, and I don't even remember seeing this in the series because I was looking for stuff like this. This is my favorite part of the Château de Beaucastel property. They took a shot of this as we walked in. This is featured prominently. This is some of the aging room. You see how excited I am by it? We went down to the cellar, and this was the scene where Camille was trained by her father a lot of the times when she was a kid, and Christy tells me how they basically emptied out the entire cellar to shoot this.
There's probably a team of about 30 people for all the setup, and now there's like 80 people every day here. They've kind of taken over. Going on at the moment is the renovation work, and because we're going to be digging tunnels underneath here with the vibrations, we were worried about the bottles. So we moved out over 1.5 million bottles, one by one.
So did you have to do any of the manual work?
No, I was lucky I was let off.
Imagine having a shoot going on plus a renovation.
All this is fake.
They just made it for the shooting.
Yeah, now I remember that they moved out all the bottles because they're doing the renovations, and then the crew had to go in and set up a new like cellar. That shot you remember because that's the table where Camille was trained for blind tastings. Here's me. Here's one of my thoughts. I just have a meager, humble YouTube channel. It's pretty insane to see all the work that goes into a setup of doing high production film. This is cool. This is actually a label they made up for the show for the set. I don't even remember seeing that label in the show.
They kept that, but they changed the name of the wine.
I'm just thinking for copyright for the Château appellation.
How did that, yeah.
Because you cannot use an appellation and the Château name that doesn't exist in a way, so they must have made a good deal.
Maybe, with the Federation.
She's being a little bit polite there. She didn't give us a direct answer, but then you find out on the show they actually are in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and they talk about Châteauneuf-du-Pape all the time. Now this is the part where a lot of the film takes place kind of in the living room next to the lab where she's doing her training. The first time I visited Château de Beaucastel, we sat in that living room area. There was a big table, but then we actually tasted in the lab because everything was moved out, and this is the set where Camille is doing a lot of her training. And I noticed that some of the glasses, they're using her actual glasses because they were the same shape as the ones in the series. Look at the lab looks exactly the same. Even though they changed the name of the property, one of Château de Beaucastel's wines is actually featured in the series. It's Roussanne Vignes, which is one of my favorite wines from France, and she talks about that right here. I think it was 2005 in the show.
The Roussanne you either have to drink young or old, before 5, 6 years old, or after 15 years old. Roussanne comes from rousse, which means ginger, as in the colour, and the wine turns a little bit orangey. It's as if it's oxidised, but actually it isn't, because it comes back. During that phase, it's kind of flat, so you need to wait till 15, and then it is like an old Burgundy.
Oh, here's Fabian trying to teach me how to say Roussanne. I cannot do the tongue or Roussanne.
Yeah, then you need to blend the two, the and the oo.
Roussanne. Ah! I gotta pronounce it. Wow, it's so funny because in the series the lab looks exactly the same. Here's the gate. In the show they come from the outside in. This is looking from inside the property looking out. Shots of the galets, the pebbles. I was watching this with my mother and she's like, is France really like that? Are the vineyards really like that? And I said, well, in this area, yes, Châteauneuf-du-Pape is famous for those big galets. The vigneron in the show talks about how the Rhone used to come through there and weathered the pebbles like this, and how they actually hold heat during the day and then let it out through the night. So that was actually accurate. And just one more little shot of the property. If any of you wine nerds know this, drop it in the comments below. When Camille and Lorenzo go to Italy in search of the wine depicted by that Italian artist painting, they go to this estate, and I could have swore that it's Tenuta San Leonardo, one of the greatest estates in Trentino, maybe of Italy. It's an absolutely beautiful estate. The Tenuta San Leonardo is one of my favorite Italian wines of all time. This show is incredibly complex, has a lot of different themes in it. What hit home for me is it bridged the gap between the worlds of Asia and Europe, where I've been spending the last 15 years of my life. I have not lived in Tokyo, although I've been there for 6.5 years. I lived in Jakarta, Indonesia, I lived in Singapore, and I lived in Hong Kong. One of the main characters, Issei, is from a noble family in Tokyo, and he's really troubled because he's so passionate about wine, but his family can't really understand it. He comes from a very noble family. I had a lot of good friends when I lived in Asia and even dated people that came from really noble families, and the amount of pressure that faced them, it was pretty insane. Yes, we face that in the West as well, but there's just something a little bit different because with some of these big companies, it's all about tradition, legacy. I mean, that puts an immense amount of pressure on the second, third, fourth generation. It's not this kind of channel, but I definitely have to take note of a few things. The theme that runs through the entire show is the link between children and parents. When I was going through my big personal development phase and going to a lot lot of seminars, and I learned about and saw how much people are really shackled by the emotional ties to their parents, and the only way you truly become free is when those ties are cut. That's what the series is all about, reconciliation. And then, of course, is the wine component. It takes a lot of real difficult concepts, things that seem kind of foreign and weird to people that aren't into wine as much, and it makes it more digestible. Another cool thing for a hardcore wine geek like me is they used a couple esoteric wines, namely later in the series when there's a competition and the two main characters have to pick wines that go with dishes. Some of the wines chosen include Sandlands, Mataro. Sandlands is a project I absolutely scream about. It's a project by the head winemaker at Turley. What he does is goes and finds a bunch of old vine vineyards in California, old vine Chenin Blanc, Carignan, Mataro, crafts great wines on them. These wines are not super expensive, but you usually need a hookup to be able to taste them. And one of the characters uses a wine that's near and dear to me, a Ramaz Nikolodze from Georgia. Although in the series they say 1998, he wasn't making wine back then. Beautiful orange wine. I think the earliest vintage I tasted was 2015. That's back when my wine career actually started in Georgia. Another thing that I really liked about the series is sometimes I think that getting hardcore into wine sometimes can be pretty useless information, especially if you're not working in a restaurant. It's nice to know that if a 140, 150 million euro inheritance is up for grabs, I at least could compete for it. Things I really did not like. There are a lot of real wines in the series. However, they made up two wines, the main estate, Château Chasson, which they completely made it up. I don't know why they couldn't use the chateau's real name, and that's the place that it was at. And number two wines that play a huge role in the story's design, Domaine Gigon and Casa dei Fossati, are completely made up. I don't understand why they just couldn't use real wines. Another thing that's helped glorify the Somme series, and you see it in films like this, is when people are blind tasting and they're calling things out of the middle of nowhere. In one of the scenes, Issei, one of the main characters, is in a meeting for a client. Someone puts a wine in front of him. He just smells it and calls out a Chateau Lepuy, and he calls out the correct vintage, I think 1971 or something like that. In another scene, some students are trying to trick another one of the characters, and then they give him a wine blind, and without tasting it, he just calls out, that's a Cuvée de Jacobins, 1961. Anybody in wine knows that's almost near impossible. I know a lot of great tasters. I taste with a lot of great tasters. Sometimes you can get the region, the variety right. Very seldom that you're going to get region, variety, producer, vintage, all that put together. It's almost like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. On a side note, I absolutely love that wine. It's a Bordeaux from the right bank, located in the village of Saint-Émilion. I was there last year tasting some older vintages with the owner. Magical experience. Tell me, have you read Drops of God, the manga, or have you seen the series? Drop it in the comments below.